A high-end private cleaner noticed the crimson stain on the billionaire's $5,000 cuff and froze. Dominic Russo stepped out of the shadows, gripped her chin, and whispered, "You saw nothing." But she had, and it changed everything. The midnight call came with a mandatory triple-rate fee and an NDA that looked thicker than a phone book. For Gemma Hayes, the premier crisis cleaner for Manhattan's ultra-wealthy, a 2:00 a.m. summons to Penthouse 4B at the Pierre Hotel usually meant one of two things: a wild party that had gone catastrophically out of hand, or a highly confidential corporate mess. But as Gemma pushed her heavy cleaning cart over the threshold of the $50 million suite, the metallic, coppery scent hanging in the air told her this was neither. The penthouse was a study in ruined luxury. Shards of baccarat crystal glittered violently against the Persian rugs. A heavy mahogany side table was splintered in two, and across the vast expanse of white Venetian plaster wall, an unmistakable streak of dark, drying crimson painted a grim picture. Gemma's pulse hammered against her ribs, but her face remained an impassive mask. In her line of work, discretion wasn't just a professional courtesy. It was a survival mechanism. She owed over $100,000 in medical debt after her mother's prolonged illness, and the agency she worked for, Immaculate Estate Services, paid her extremely well to be both blind and mute. "Start with the rug," a voice ordered from the shadows. Gemma flinched, her grip tightening on the handle of her cart. From the darkened terrace stepped a man who commanded the room simply by existing in it. Dominic Russo. Even someone as removed from high society as Gemma knew the name. How was a phantom of Wall Street, a venture capitalist who bought and gutted companies with a ruthless, surgical precision. Yet rumors always swirled around his family's true source of wealth, tying the Russo name to shipping ports, offshore accounts, and the kind of violence that never made the 6 o'clock news. Dominic was devastatingly composed. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his sharp, aristocratic jawline was clenched tight. He was holding a glass of Macallan 25, the amber liquid catching the dim light of the chandelier. He wore a crisp-tailored charcoal suit, but he was missing his tie, and the top 2 buttons of his shirt were undone. "The rug," Dominic repeated, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that sent a strange shiver down her spine. "Hydrogen peroxide and cold water. I assume you know the drill." "Yes, Mr. Russo," Gemma said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. She pulled on her thick black nitrile gloves and knelt on the floor. For the next hour, the only sounds in the sprawling penthouse were the harsh scrubbing of bristles against wool and the rhythmic ticking of Dominic's platinum Patek Philippe watch. He didn't leave the room. He sat in a leather wing-back chair, nursing his scotch, watching her every move with dark, predatory eyes. It was unnerving. Usually, the clients vanished into another room, too ashamed or too arrogant to watch the help clean up their sins. But Dominic studied her, analyzing the methodical, emotionless way she erased the violence from his sanctuary. When the rug was spotless and the wall was scrubbed bare, Gemma began packing her industrial solvents. "My jacket," Dominic said suddenly. She turned to see him holding out the charcoal suit jacket. "It needs to be dry cleaned, sir. I do structural and environmental cleaning." "Take it to your specialized facility. Handle it yourself," he commanded, stepping into the light. As he extended the jacket toward her, the ambient light from the city skyline caught the French cuff of his stark white dress shirt. Gemma's eyes naturally darted to the movement. There, soaking into the immaculate white Egyptian cotton, was a dark, blossoming stain of fresh blood. It wasn't a smear from a grazed knuckle. It was thick, soaking through the threads right above a solid gold cufflink. For a fraction of a second, Gemma's professional mask slipped. Her eyes widened, her breath itching in her throat. She had just spent an hour cleaning what she tried to convince herself was spilled wine. But this was undeniable. Before she could look away, Dominic's hand shot out. His grip on her chin was like a steel vice, startlingly fast and incredibly strong. He stepped into her space, his towering frame completely eclipsing the city lights behind him. The scent of expensive cologne, tobacco, and danger washed over her. "You saw nothing," he whispered, his face mere inches from hers. The words weren't a threat. They were a quiet, terrifying decree. His dark eyes locked onto hers, searching for any sign of panic or betrayal. "I saw nothing," Gemma echoed, her voice barely a breath. Dominic studied her face for a moment longer, his thumb brushing ever so slightly against her jawline in a motion that was entirely too intimate for the context. Then he released her, dropping the jacket into her trembling hands. "Leo will escort you out," Dominic said, turning his back to her. "Leave the invoice on the counter." Gemma practically fled the penthouse. As the private elevator plummeted toward the ground floor, she clutched the Tom Ford jacket to her chest. She knew she should drop it in the nearest dumpster, quit her job, and disappear. But the heavy, unsaid promise in Dominic Russo's eyes told her that running would only make her prey. The following morning, Gemma stood outside her cramped fourth-floor walk-up in Queens, clutching a lukewarm cup of bodega coffee. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the crimson stain on the white cotton and felt the bruising heat of Dominic's fingers on her skin. She had dropped the jacket at the agency's secure vault, filing it under an anonymous numeric code. She was just trying to pretend the night hadn't happened. But reality has a funny way of catching up. A sleek, black Mercedes Maybach pulled up to the curb, its tinted windows gleaming in the morning sun. The doors locked with a heavy, metallic thunk that echoed down the quiet street. The driver's side door opened, and Leo stepped out. He was a mountain of a man, dressed in a sharp black suit that did little to hide the bulk of a shoulder holster. "Miss Hayes," Leo said smoothly, gesturing to the back door. "Mr. Russo requests your presence for breakfast." "I have a shift at the agency in an hour," Gemma lied, taking a step back toward her apartment door. "Your agency has been acquired," Leo replied, offering a thin, polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "As of 6 a.m. this morning, Immaculate Estate Services is a subsidiary of Russo Holdings. You work directly for him now. Please, get in the car." Gemma's blood ran cold. He had bought her entire company just to control her. Realizing she had absolutely no choice, she climbed into the back of the Maybach. She was driven not to a corporate office, but to a heavily fortified historic brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. The interior was a masterpiece of old-world mahogany and modern security glass. She was led into a sprawling dining room, where Dominic sat at the head of a long table, reading the Wall Street Journal. "Sit, Gemma," he said, not looking up from the paper. She sat stiffly on the edge of a velvet chair. "You bought my company." "I require exclusivity," Dominic replied, folding the newspaper and giving her his full attention. In the daylight, he was even more striking, but the danger radiating from him was palpable. "You didn't flinch last night. You didn't ask questions, and you didn't run to the police. Those are rare qualities. I clean houses, Mr. Russo. I don't want any part of whatever it is you do. What I do is manage risk, Dominic said, leaning forward, resting his forearms on the table. And right now, you are a risk, but you're also an asset. My associates and I require a permanent, in-house cleaner. Someone who understands discretion. I am offering you $50,000 a month, tax-free, wired to a Cayman account in your name. Gemma's breath caught. $50,000 a month. It would pay off her mother's medical debts in 2 months. It would change her life. But it was blood money. And if I say no? She asked quietly. Dominic's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. I don't offer things twice, Gemma, and I don't leave loose ends walking around the city. She swallowed hard. When do I start? Over the next 3 weeks, Gemma became a ghost within the Russo syndicate. She cleaned boardrooms after intense, aggressive negotiations. She scrubbed down the interiors of armored SUVs. She never saw the bodies, but she saw the aftermath. The shattered teeth, the blood, the sheer volume of violence that underscored Dominic's pristine corporate empire. Yet the most dangerous part wasn't the blood. It was Dominic. I was always there. Whenever she was cleaning his personal study or his private residence, he lingered. He began asking her questions about her life, her debts, her preferences. He bought her expensive teas, replacing the cheap bodega coffee in the staff kitchen with imported matcha. There was a dark, possessive tension building between them. He watched her with a hungry intensity, and against her better judgment, Gemma found herself looking back. She was drawn to the quiet moments when the ruthless mob boss would look exhausted, rubbing his temples, letting his guard down just a fraction of an inch when it was only the 2 of them in the room. One evening, while cleaning the top drawer of his oak desk, Gemma found a leather-bound ledger. It was left out in the open, almost as if it was a test. She glanced at the pages. They weren't shipping manifests. They were payoffs. Judges, NYPD captains, politicians. She slammed the book shut, her heart racing. Curiosity is a dangerous flaw, Gemma, Dominic murmured from the doorway. She spun around, nearly knocking over her solvent tray. I was just dusting. He walked slowly toward her, backing her against the heavy desk. He reached out, trailing a knuckle down the side of her neck. His touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core. I leave things out because I trust you. Don't make me regret it. I don't want to know your secrets, Dominic, she whispered, breathless as he stepped into her personal space. You already know too many, he replied, his voice dropping to a husky murmur. He leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear. You belong to this world now. You belong to me. Gemma closed her eyes, entirely consumed by the terrifying thrill of his proximity. But reality came crashing down 3 days later. Gemma was given a rare afternoon off to buy specific organic solvents from a supplier in Hell's Kitchen. As she walked down the rainy pavement, a man in a beige trench coat stepped out of an alleyway, blocking her path. He flashed a badge. Gemma Hayes, Agent Holden, FBI Organized Crime Division. Gemma's heart plummeted. I don't know what you're talking about. Save it, Holden snapped, pulling her into the shelter of a closed storefront awning. We know you've been working for Dominic Russo. We know about the 50 grand a month. We know you clean up his murders. I'm just a maid, Gemma lied smoothly, mimicking Dominic's icy composure. Holden laughed, a bitter, harsh sound. "You think he protects his people? Let me show you something." Holden pulled a manila folder from his coat and shoved a photograph into Gemma's hands. It was a surveillance photo of Dominic, standing over a body in a warehouse. But it wasn't just any body. Gemma stared at the face of the dead man on the pavement, the world spinning violently around her. It was her estranged older brother, Liam. "Your boss didn't hire you because you're a good cleaner, Gemma," Agent Holden whispered maliciously. "He hired you to keep his victim's sister close. Now, are you going to help us tear down his empire, or are you going down with him?" The photograph slipped from Gemma's trembling fingers, fluttering to the wet pavement like a dead leaf. The rain in Hell's Kitchen suddenly felt freezing, soaking through her thin coat. But she couldn't feel it. All she could see was Liam's face. They hadn't spoken in 4 years, not since he stole their mother's wedding ring to pawn for gambling debts. But he was still her brother. He was the boy who had taught her how to ride a bike in the narrow alleys of Queens. "You're lying," Gemma choked out, staring at Agent Holden. "Dominic wouldn't. He doesn't do the hits himself. I know how his organization works." Holden scoffed, kicking the photograph with the toe of his scuffed Oxford shoe. "Russo is a sociopath, Miss Hayes. He likes to get his hands dirty when someone steals from him. Your brother was running numbers for a rival syndicate, the Moretti family. He skimmed off the top of a Russo operation in the Diamond District. Dominic found out. He gutted him in that warehouse, and then he hired you as a sick power play." Holden reached into his trench coat and pulled out a small metallic device, no larger than a button. He pressed it into her numb palm. "This is a state-of-the-art audio transmitter," Holden said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You have access to his private study. You've seen the ledger. I need you to get him talking about the Moretti dispute, or better yet, get him to admit he handled Liam personally. You do this, and you get witness protection. You refuse, and I arrest you right now for accessory to murder and tampering with evidence." Gemma's mind raced. The $50,000 a month. The quiet, intense moments where Dominic made her feel like the center of the universe. The way his thumb had brushed her jawline. Was it all a manipulation? Was she just a pawn in a sadistic game played by a monster? "I'll do it," she whispered, her voice hollow, returning to the Brooklyn Heights. Brownstone felt like stepping into a mausoleum. The heavy mahogany doors clicked shut behind her, sealing her inside the gilded cage. She had pinned the transmitter to the underside of her uniform collar, the tiny piece of metal feeling as heavy as an anvil against her collarbone. She found Dominic in his study. The room was bathed in the warm, amber glow of a Tiffany desk lamp he was pouring over blueprints, a crystal glass of bourbon sweating on a leather coaster beside him. He looked up as she entered, his dark eyes instantly locking onto her face. "You're pale," Dominic noted, his voice dropping into that low, gravelly register that usually made her stomach flutter. Tonight, it made her blood run cold. "Did the supplier give you trouble?" "No," Gemma lied, forcing herself to walk toward the bookshelves, pretending to inspect them for dust. "Just caught in the rain. It's cold outside." Dominic stood slowly. He didn't return to his blueprints. Instead, he tracked her movements across the room like a predator stalking wounded prey. "You're a terrible liar, Gemma. Your hands are shaking. You knocked a bottle of ammonia against the cart when you walked in. You never make a sound." Gemma froze, her back to him. The transmitter burned against her skin. She had to get him to... She had to ask about the ledger. "I saw someone today," she said, turning around to face him. She kept her chin high, trying to channel the same icy composure he always displayed. "An FBI agent, named Holden." Dominic's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He took a step toward her. "And what did Agent Holden have to say?" "He showed me a picture," Gemma pushed on, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. "A picture of my brother, Liam. He's dead, Dominic." Dominic stopped a few feet away from her. He looked down at the Persian rug, a muscle jumping in his jaw, before looking back up into her eyes. "I know." "You know?" she gasped, tears finally spilling over her lashes. "Holden said you killed him. He said Liam stole from you, and you killed him. And then you bought my agency just to keep me as a pet." "Holden is a dead man walking," Dominic said softly. He closed the distance between them, ignoring her flinch. He reached up, his large, warm hands gently cupping her face. "Listen to me very carefully, Gemma. Your brother was a fool. He got mixed up with the Moretti family, and he stole from them, not me. The Morettis killed him." "Then why were you in the photograph?" she sobbed, trying to pull away, but his grip was firm and anchoring. "Because I found him," Dominic said, his eyes blazing with a fierce, protective intensity. "I tracked him down because I was looking into his debts. By the time I got to that warehouse, he was already gone. I didn't kill him, Gemma. I bought your agency to protect you. The Morettis know who you are. They know Liam had a sister. If you weren't under my roof, protected by my men, you would already be dead." Gemma stared at him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Holden is FBI." "Holden hasn't been FBI for 3 years, Dominic stated, his voice laced with venom. "He's a disgraced agent on the Moretti payroll. He's a fixer. If he approached you, it wasn't to build a case against me." Suddenly, Dominic's eyes darted to the collar of her shirt. He saw the faint, unnatural stiffness of the fabric. In one swift, fluid motion, he reached out and ripped the tiny transmitter from the cloth. He dropped it onto the floor and crushed it under the heel of his Italian leather shoe. "He wasn't trying to record me," Dominic whispered, pulling a sleek black Glock 19 from the holster beneath his suit jacket. "He was tracking you." Before Gemma could process the terrifying reality that she had just led a cartel of hitmen directly to Dominic's private sanctuary, the deafening sound of shattered glass echoed through the brownstone. The heavy, reinforced security windows in the front parlor blew inward under a hail of automatic gunfire. "Get down!" Dominic roared, tackling Gemma to the floor behind the massive oak desk. Splinters of wood and chunks of plaster rained down around them as bullets tore through the study, shredding the expensive leather furniture and destroying the Tiffany lamp. The house plunged into darkness, save for the flashing streetlights outside and the intermittent muzzle flashes from the hallway. "Leo!" Dominic yelled over the chaos, checking the magazine of his weapon. "I'm here, boss." Leo's booming voice echoed from the corridor, followed immediately by the booming retort of a shotgun. "There's at least 6 of them. Front door is breached." Dominic grabbed Gemma's arm, hauling her up into a crouch. His eyes were wild, but his movements were calculated and precise. "We have to move to the basement. There's a reinforced tunnel that leads to the subway access grates. Stay behind me and do exactly what I say." Gemma nodded, terrified beyond words. The man holding her hand wasn't just a venture capitalist anymore. He was the ruthless mafia boss the rumors painted him to be. And yet, she had never felt safer than she did in his grip. They crawled out of the study, moving through the shadows of the destroyed hallway. Leo was pinned behind a marble pillar, exchanging fire with 3 masked men advancing through the foyer. "Cover us!" Dominic commanded, firing 3 rapid shots into the darkness. One of the masked men collapsed with a wet thud. Dominic dragged Gemma toward the kitchen door, but as they pushed through the swinging hinges, a figure stepped out from the pantry. It was Holden. The disgraced agent was holding a suppressed pistol aimed directly at Dominic's chest. "Checkmate, Russo," Holden sneered, a sadistic smile twisting his face. "The Morettis send their regards." "You're a coward, Holden," Dominic growled, stepping in front of Gemma, completely shielding her body with his own. "You use a grieving woman to do your dirty work." "It worked, didn't it?" Holden chuckled. "She practically handed you to us." Gemma's eyes darted frantically around the kitchen. Her cleaning cart, the one she used to maintain the industrial stainless steel appliances, was parked right beside her. Her mind snapped back to the hundreds of hours she spent scrubbing, mixing, and surviving in her profession. She knew the chemical composition of everything on that cart. Holden's finger tightened on the trigger. Gemma didn't think. She reacted. She grabbed a heavy industrial jug of concentrated bleach and hurled it directly at Holden's face. Holden ducked instinctively, raising his arm to block the heavy plastic jug. It struck his shoulder and hit the tile floor, bursting open and sending a wave of pungent liquid across the ground. In that split second of distraction, Dominic lunged forward. Dominic moved with terrifying speed, striking Holden in the jaw. With the heavy grip of his Glock, the former agent crumpled to the ground, his weapon skittering across the slick, bleach-covered tiles. Dominic didn't hesitate. He raised his boot and stomped down viciously on Holden's right knee. The sickening crack echoed in the kitchen, followed by Holden's agonizing scream. "That's for Liam," Dominic spat, kicking the suppressed pistol under the industrial refrigerator. Sirens began to wail in the distance. The real police were finally responding to the war zone that Brooklyn Heights had become. "We need to go now," Dominic said, grabbing Gemma's waist and practically lifting her toward the basement door. Leo backed into the kitchen a moment later, bleeding from a graze on his shoulder, but otherwise intact. They descended into the darkness of the subterranean tunnel, the heavy steel door locking behind them with a definitive clang, sealing off the chaos above. The tunnel was damp and smelled of old earth and rust. Dominic clicked on a tactical flashlight, illuminating the concrete path. Gemma leaned against the cold wall, gasping for air, her adrenaline finally crashing. She slid down to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees. She was covered in plaster dust, her uniform torn, her hands trembling violently. Dominic knelt in front of her. He placed the flashlight on the ground and gently took her shaking hands in his. The blood on his knuckles was a stark contrast to his pristine, albeit ruined, tailored suit. "You saved my life," he said quietly, the ruthless Mafia Boss replaced once again by the man who bought her expensive matcha tea. "I threw bleach at him," she whispered, a hysterical, breathless laugh escaping her lips. "I'm a cleaner. It's what I do." "You're more than that," Dominic murmured. He leaned in, his forehead resting gently against hers. In the damp darkness of the escape tunnel, surrounded by the reality of his violent world, Gemma didn't pull away. She leaned into him, anchoring herself to the only solid thing in her shattered life. "You aren't just a cleaner anymore, Gemma. You're mine, and I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone hurt you again." She looked up into his dark, unwavering eyes, realizing that the crimson stain she had scrubbed away in the penthouse all those weeks ago hadn't just been blood. It had been an invitation into a world she could never leave. And as his lips finally crashed down onto hers in a bruising, desperate kiss, she realized something even more terrifying. She didn't want to leave. Did this mafia romance story keep you on the edge of your seat? The dangerous world of Dominic and Gemma proves that sometimes the biggest stains aren't left by blood, but by betrayal. If you loved this intense, twist-filled audio drama, please hit that like button, share this video with your fellow romance readers, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a captivating dark romance upload.